Plant adaptations, pollination and seed dispersal. The early findings of ELAINA BLANKENHAGEN. Please note, these findings were researched in various parts of King County, including native prairies and Big Rock Forest Preserve. Flower structures in correlation with pollination. When beginning to understand pollination, first we need to look at the process of how pollination is done. One type of pollination is self-pollination, the pollination of the flower by pollen from the same flower or from another flower of the same plant. An example of this is the sweet pea flowers. In self-pollination, there is no diversity in the genes and therefore the purity of race is maintained. Disadvantages. Since there is no mixing of genes, there is no new characters or features that are introduced into the lineage of the offsprings. Self-pollination is said to reduce the vigor and vitality of the race, as there are no new features introduced. Without new features introduced, the resultant offspring's immunity of diseases reduces. Cross-pollination is the main kind of pollination we see. Cross-pollination occurs when the pollen grains are transferred to the flower from a different plant. There are two different types of agents of cross-pollination, abiotic and biotic. In abiotic pollination, we look at anemophily pollination, pollination by wind, and hydrophily, pollination by water. In wind-pollinated species, the pollen is dispersed by air currents from the anthers in hopes that some of it will land on the stigmas or receptive tips of the female pistils. Plants that use wind pollination have numerous tiny dull-colored flowers with little to no nectar or scent because they need not attract pollinators. Water pollination is limited to aquatic plants. Pollen travels from one flower to another on or below the water surface depending on the plant. Now, why don't we take a look at biotic pollination? Plant-pollinator relationship is mutualistic because both the plants and the pollinator benefit from the interaction. Entomophily pollination is pollination by insects, such as flies, mosquitoes, moths, butterflies, bees, ants, and beetles. Ornithophily, pollination by birds. CHIROPTEROPHILY, pollination by bats. MALACOPHILY, pollination by snails or slugs. And MALACOPHILY, pollination by ants.
Some traits of a good pollinator. Good pollinators would have more hair. The hairs allow pollen to stick to the pollinator and be transferred to other plants. Without hairs, less pollen is collected, and the pollen that is collected is much less likely to stick until the pollinator visits the next plant. An example of this would be bees, butterflies, and moths. Another trait is larger size. Large pollinators can carry more pollen. Buzz pollination is usually only performed by larger bees. Some pollinators that have this trait are bumblebees and hummingbirds. Another trait that we look at is flight. Pollinators that fly usually transfer more pollen than those that walk. Some examples of these pollinators are butterflies, hummingbirds, and bats. Pollination behavior is pollinators that visit a large number of flowers in the foraging trip and are usually better pollinators. Pollinators that visit a narrow range of plant species on a foraging trip are more successful at pollinating. Some examples of these are bees. The next trait is pollen diet. Pollinators that eat pollen usually come into closer contact with pollen and can pick up on their bodies. An example of this is bees. Another trait is pollinators that come into close contact with the flower. So this helps more pollen stick to the pollinator that comes into close contact with the flower. Some examples of these are bees, ants, and beetles.
Pay close attention and study these different corolla types as we're about to hear about them in the next part of this video. Here are some typical flower shapes associated with different pollinators. The first one we're going to look at is cup-shaped flowers. Examples of these are campulate, bell-shaped, saccate, sac-like, palate, another sac-like one, ursulate, urn-like. Pollinators cup-shaped flowers attract are bees, beetles, and ants. Next flower type is bowl-shaped or open. Examples of these types include cruciform, cross-shaped, Ligulate. Now, the ligulate flowers are part of a composite flower head. The flower itself is the small little parts of the middle of this composite flower head. Another, stellate, star-shaped. Pollinators of bowl-shaped flowers include bees, butterflies, beetles, and ants. The next flower shape is tube-shaped flowers. Examples of this shape include funnel-form flowers, salviform, and tubular, like a tube. Pollinators attracted to tube-shaped flowers include hummingbirds and butterflies, and moths. Their long proboscises allow them to reach nectar at the base of the corolla. Both labiate and papillinoid flowers generally only attract bees. Spurred flowers such as columbines generally attract butterflies and hummingbirds due to the need for a long proboscis to reach nectar.
Pollinator species can be categorized as either dietary specialists or generalists. Specialist pollinators are picky, collecting pollen from a narrow range of closely related plants. Generalist pollinators are more flexible and collect pollen from a variety of unrelated plants. Plants attract pollinators based on the flower's shape, size, color, and nectar guides. A flower's color is also a clue to the type of pollinators it attracts.
Red flowers attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and flies. Orange flowers attract butterflies and hummingbirds. Yellow flowers attract bees and butterflies. Green flowers attract wind. Blue flowers attract bees. Purple flowers attract bees and butterflies as well as flies. Pink flowers attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and moths. White or pale flowers attract bees, moths, bats, and beetles.
Unlike most plant pollinator relationships, some relationships can be commensalic. An example of this would be plants getting pollinated due to odorous attraction. Flowers that produce a sweet scent often attract butterflies, bats, and moths. Some flowers produce scents so strong they can be detected by insects more than half a mile away. When scent is the primary method of attracting pollinators, the flower does not need to be showy. Thus, the plants that you scent to attract pollinators may not have colorful flowers. Some plants produce unpleasant smells that mimic the odors of rotting flesh or dung to attract flies and beetles. While inspecting the flower to locate the source of these odors, the insect comes in to contact with pollen. This relationship is commensalic in that the plant benefits from the interaction because pollen is transferred from one plant to another, but the pollinator receives no benefit. As we switch topics from pollination to seed dispersal, let's take a look at the coneflower. The coneflower is made up of a composite seed head of ligule flowers. After the process of pollination, the ovaries and the ligules mature, and then they go on to create these seed heads as shown.
To the regular eye, these limestone cliffs may just look normal, but when you look up close, you see that life will always find a way. Just as there is many methods to pollination, there are many methods of seed dispersal. Some of them include animal dispersal, explosion, dispersal by water, dispersal by wind, dispersal by bursting, or dispersal by, us, humans. In wind dispersal, there's different types of modified seeds. Some seeds have silky hairs, some are wing seeds, and some are papery thin seeds. Silky hairs on fruit help the seed to be blown by wind. This method allows the seeds to be blown every which way without any help from any outside forces. This is the milkweed plant, found at Jericho Forest Preserve. Some other plants that use silky hairs are goldenrod and butterfly weed, as well as liatris. As you can see, this goldenrod has been struck, and after it's been struck, the silky hairs just carry the seed flawlessly. Another structure used in wind seed dispersal is samaras. Samaras have a very papery-like structure on them that is protecting the seed, and they can easily be picked up and carried through the wind. This specific specimen is the box elder. Samara is a very common type of dry fruit found commonly in the genus Acer, otherwise known as the maples. This is another example of a samara. It is very different in shape, but it is still a seed enclosed by a papery-like structure. This is a hope plant. Some plants are dispersed by gravity. These plants have heavy fruits that drop to the ground when ready, and then the baby plants shoot up right by the parent plants. A problem with this is that the plants are competing for resources. When the fruit is heavy enough, it falls directly to the ground and then can be picked up by birds or other animals and further dispersed. The capsules of the American wahoo include fleshy berries. When the capsules become ripe, they open up and the berries drop to the ground. The silices of a honey locust tree fall off the tree once they become heavy enough. Another type of dispersal is water dispersal. These seeds and fruits generally have a hollow inside or cavity that allows them to float atop water. An example of this in our region is the black walnut. Here's a video of me tossing a black walnut that has been off the tree for a while into water. As you can see, the black walnut floats in the water. Well, friends, this black walnut nut is now one with the waves. The water course is going to take this seed, and wherever it ends up is where the plant is going to grow. The next kind of seed dispersal is seed dispersal by animals. Plant seeds are ingested by animals such as birds and then spread through surviving through the stomach lining of the animals and ending up in their fecal matter, and then the seeds grow from there. Many plants have evolved to have fleshy fruits that are very colorful to attract the eyes of the beholder, the one who will be eating them. Due to this, we have many invasive plants in our ecosystem right now. These pictures show buckthorn, honeysuckle, burning bush, and nightshade, barberry, these pokeweed. These are very invasive plants that the birds pick up and move by seed by either ingesting them or simply dropping them on the ground. Larger animals can catch hitchhikers, as some might say, on their fur, which aids in seed dispersal. The bracts of the fruits on the burdock plant has an inflorescence with hooked tips, causing it to stick very easily to furry or soft surfaces. As you can see in the photo, it's very hard to get these off once they're on. I'm sure a lot of you have spent hours picking them off your clothes after a walk off the path in the woods. In case you've forgotten, yes, humans are animals too, and of course, we do take a major part in seed dispersal. We collect seed and sell it for economic purposes. We accidentally spread seeds. There's all sorts of ways humans aid in seed dispersal. Expulsion, the fruits burst or explode, and the seeds are carried away. This is another method of seed dispersal. The orange spotted touch-me-not has a very unique method of seed dispersal. When the seed capsules are touched, they are known to explode, as seen, and then the seeds inside are then released into the surrounding environment. Explosion is often a gateway to other types of seed dispersal, as in these samples that are spread by wind.